Have you ever asked yourself, why is it that the moment I walk away, stay silent, and choose freedom, I suddenly become the enemy in the eyes of the narcissist? For most people, a breakup, a real ending, brings sadness, regret, maybe longing, but eventually acceptance. With a narcissist, it's different. To them, your leaving isn't just about losing a partner, it's about losing control. In their world, you were never simply a lover or a companion. You were their mirror, the reflection that kept them alive. Every smile you gave, every tear you shed, every argument you engaged in, all of it served as proof that they still had power, that they were still real. So when you decide to leave, quietly, without begging, without drama, without apology, your silence becomes the sharpest strike. You take away the only mirror they had to see themselves. No reactions, no one left to pull into their emotional game. They fall into a void of invisibility and emptiness. This is why your freedom makes you their enemy, not because you did something wrong, not because you weren't enough, but because you did the one thing they fear most. You slipped out of their control. And in today's video, we're going to dig deep into the psychology behind that hatred, why your departure shatters their illusion, why your healing terrifies them, and why your greatest victory isn't in revenge, but in peace. To understand why your walking away makes the narcissist see you as the enemy, we need to uncover their deepest fear. It's not the fear of losing love. It's not even the fear of being alone. It's the fear of losing the mirror that reflects them back to themselves. Unlike ordinary people, those who can build a sense of self through experience, growth, and inner maturity, the narcissist has no such foundation. Their identity is like a house built out of mirrors, and those mirrors are nothing more than the reactions of others. Every compliment you gave was a brick. Every time you cried or lashed out became the cement that held it together. Over time, you were the one who built the house of their fragile ego. For them, every reaction from you, whether positive or negative, carries weight. It confirms that they exist, that they matter, that they still hold power. When you smile, they feel attractive. When you cry, they feel significant. When you get angry, they feel influential. To them, love was never true connection. It was only a tool to keep the illusion of self intact. But when you begin to change, when you fall silent, when you no longer argue, no longer cry, no longer react, those mirrors start to shatter one by one. And when you finally leave quietly, without explanation, without final words, you take with you not only yourself, but the most precious mirror they ever had. In that moment, the narcissist is forced to face a terrifying reality. Without anyone reflecting them, they become invisible, even to themselves. Without your eyes, without your reactions, they no longer know who they are. The fragile self they clung to now reveals its hollow core. That's why your departure isn't just a breakup, it's an ego collapse. It's the greatest fear they can never name. The fear that inside, there is nothing, only a cold and empty void. And so, in their eyes, you are no longer the one who once loved them, once endured, once forgave. You become the enemy, not because you hurt them, but because you did the one thing they cannot bear. You took away the mirror and forced them to look into the darkness within. When you walk away from a narcissist, you do something they never wrote a script for. You break the game. In their world, every relationship is like a stage play. They are the director, the star, the one who writes every line. And you, whether knowingly or unwillingly, are cast in the supporting role. There only to glorify them, to affirm the power and charm they imagine themselves to have. As long as you keep playing, the script flows. They can wound you, then slip into the role of savior with a hug or an empty promise. They can push you away, then pull you back in, just to prove your emotions are still in their grip. Every time you cry, rage, or forgive, it all becomes another scene that sustains their illusion of control. But then you choose to leave. No tears, no shouting, no need for a dramatic finale. You go silent, and you don't come back. To a normal person, that would be closure. But to a narcissist, it feels like betrayal. You didn't just walk away, you stripped them of control, the very lifeblood that keeps their fragile identity alive. The moment you stand firm on your own, when you no longer need them to define your worth, you put them in the most dangerous position of all, exposed to the truth that their power was only ever an illusion, and in their mind, anyone who ruins the game becomes the enemy. What's even more terrifying for them is that your strength doesn't come from shouting or revenge, it comes from calm. When you no longer need explanations, no longer demand justice from them, no longer wait for their apology, you flip the balance of power. The very things they once used to chain you, your emotions, your hopes, your dependency, become completely useless. That's why they hate you to their core, because you no longer play your part in their theater. You step off the stage and they're left alone under the spotlight, fumbling through a script with no audience. In the eyes of the narcissist, the greatest enemy is not the betrayer, not even the opponent. It's the one who dares to walk away in silence, leaving behind a void that forces them to face the truth. Their power was never real. After you walk away from a narcissist, the first thing you see might confuse you. They seem better than ever. They're smiling more, showing up radiant on social media, maybe even flaunting a brand new partner. On the surface, you might wonder, was I never that important? Have they really moved on so quickly? But don't be fooled. What you're seeing is nothing more than a mask thrown together in desperation. Narcissists know better than anyone that image is their most powerful weapon. If you leave them in silence, they feel an even stronger need to prove to the world and to themselves that they're fine, that they're still desirable, that you didn't hurt them at all. So they rush to construct a facade of happiness. The new partner, the laughter, the bragging, it's all just stage props. But behind the curtain lies a terrifying emptiness. At night, when the audience is gone, they are forced to face a truth they cannot bear. The mirror is gone. You are no longer there to validate their existence, to cry, to rage, to love, to forgive. Without you, they have no idea who they are. This so-called new person is nothing more than an experiment. They need fresh reactions, a new mirror. But soon they realize, no one can replace you. Not because you were perfect, but because you once saw them with such clarity, it scared even them. You stayed even after glimpsing the shards behind their mask. That made you the truest mirror they ever had. The new person is only a pale shadow, too shallow to reflect what they desperately crave. And so, even while they plaster on smiles, their inner world begins to shake. They compare. They remember the way you looked at them in silence, the gaze that needed no words to strip away every lie. From that moment, the mask begins to crack. On the outside, they keep performing, keep smiling, but on the inside, they're trembling at the most horrifying possibility of all, that no one believes in their play anymore. And when the mask finally falls, all that remains is the emptiness they've been trying to hide all along. When the mask begins to crack, the narcissist doesn't simply accept the truth. They will never admit they're collapsing, never admit that your leaving stripped them of their mirror. Instead, they fight back against this painful reality in every way they can. The first, and most common, strategy is rewriting the story. In their world, you could never leave simply because you saw the truth. No, that's far too dangerous for their ego. So they invent a different script. You were selfish, you were weak, you were overly sensitive, or worse, you were the betrayer. They need to tell this story not only to convince others, but most of all to convince themselves that they are still in control of the narrative. The second strategy is finding new supply. The emptiness inside them won't allow them to exist for long without reactions from someone. So they quickly dive into a new relationship, showering the new person with rushed romance, sweet promises, tender gestures. But in reality, it's nothing but the same old cycle, searching for another mirror to reflect their existence. Here's the problem though, no one can ever replace you. Not because you were their true love, but because you once saw through their mask and still stayed long enough for them to believe you'd never leave. The new person might be more compliant, easier to control, but they'll never give the deep reflection you once did. And when the narcissist realizes this, the panic inside only grows louder. Sometimes they even turn back toward you, not with genuine remorse, but with subtle signals. A short message, a random check-in, a gesture designed to make you hesitate. They aren't truly seeking you. What they're seeking is the feeling that they still exist in your mind. But if you remain silent, if you refuse to step back into the old trap, then every attempt falls into the void, and in that silence they're forced to face a brutal truth. All their tricks, all their manipulations no longer work. The harder they try to fight, the more it proves that the power they thought they had was only an illusion. And that is the first step of their internal collapse. A collapse that isn't loud, but slow-burning, irreversible, and inescapable. When every tactic fails, when no one reacts anymore, the narcissist enters the most terrifying stage of all, the silent collapse. What makes this collapse different is that it isn't loud. There are no dramatic rages, no desperate pleading, no tearful breakdowns. Instead, it eats away quietly from within, like a building that once looked solid but has been rotting from the foundation. Eventually it crumbles, not with a great crash, but with a quiet scattering of dust and rubble. On the outside, they keep trying to maintain the familiar facade. They still go to work, they still smile, they still post bright curated pictures online. But if you look closely, the light in their eyes is gone. Behind the smile lies a fatigue that can't be hidden, because at this point they are facing their worst nightmare. There is no audience left for their play. In the silence, they begin to lose themselves. They no longer know which role to play: the victor, the abandoned, or the indifferent one. None of the roles feel complete, because without someone there to reflect them, every performance becomes hollow. It's here that they fall into a hidden kind of depression. They don't sob like someone mourning a true love. Instead, they sit in long stretches of emptiness, haunted by one relentless question: who am I when there is no one left to control? This is a pain few people ever see, because the narcissist will never let the world know they are weak. They mask it with smiles, with new performances, with new stories, but inside, pieces of their fragile self are crumbling one by one. The emptiness they face isn't the sorrow of losing a lover. It's the disintegration of an entire power system, one built entirely on illusion. And as that system falls apart layer by layer, they find themselves with nothing left to cling to. What remains is only a cold, dark void. The very truth they've spent their whole lives running from, that inside they never had a real self at all. And it is your silence, your decision to walk away, that finally forces them to confront that void. After the mask has cracked and the silent collapse begins, the narcissist often stands at a crossroads. But the irony is this: even though there are two paths, most of them choose the easier one, the path that leads straight back into the same old cycle. The first path, continuing the familiar toxic loop. This is the choice most narcissists make. They don't dare face the inner void. They don't have the courage to ask, who am I without the mask? So they set out to rebuild the illusion. They put on a new role, the successful one, the kind one, the perfect lover. Anything that helps them avoid the truth. And then they throw themselves into new relationships, rushed, shallow, desperate, just to find another mirror to reflect their existence. But over time, those relationships grow shorter, emptier, more chaotic. Like a weary actor, they keep trying to perform, but the play loses its shine, its force, its believability. The second path, the rare awakening. Very few narcissists take this road because it requires what they lack most, humility. This path begins when they hit rock bottom, when there is no one left to blame, when every relationship has fallen apart. In that moment of despair, some finally dare to look straight into the mirror and see there is nothing left to reflect but a vast, empty void. If they choose to continue, this moment can become the beginning of real change, a long, grueling journey of building a self from within, learning responsibility, and discovering how to connect authentically. But this path is so rare, it's almost the exception. And this is the difference. While most narcissists will forever see you as the enemy, the one who shattered their illusion, only a very few will have the courage to admit that you were the mirror that forced them to see the truth. For them, hatred may eventually give way to fear, and if they're fortunate, even to awakening. But for you, it doesn't matter which path they choose, because the moment you walked away, you had already done your part. You ended the play and began the journey of living truthfully for yourself. After all the emotional storms, the power games, and the false masks, it's time you hear one truth. Leaving was never a failure. On the contrary, it was proof of an inner strength you may not have realized you had. You once loved. You once waited patiently. You once hoped that someday they would change. You forgave. You gave. You even tried, again and again, to mend cracks you didn't create. But in the end, you understood. The longer you stayed, the more you lost yourself. And when you finally found the courage to walk away, it wasn't defeat. It was the victory of awakening. In the eyes of the narcissist, you became the enemy because you did the one thing they fear most. You refused to be controlled. But in your own eyes, that was the moment you became truly free. The paradox is this: the more you heal, the more they panic. The calmer you become, the more their falseness is exposed. And every time you smile, not to prove anything, but simply because you are living in peace, you become living proof of a truth they never want to face. Real love isn't tied to power, but to inner freedom. Remember this: you don't need their validation to know you're right, you don't need their apology to know you're worthy, and you don't need to witness their downfall to know you've won. Because your greatest victory is the peace you cultivate every single day, a peace they will never have. If there is one thing you should hold on to, it's this: you are not the enemy in this story. You are simply the one who chose to love yourself enough to walk away. And in that choice, you closed a chapter of illusion and began a new one, written with truth, with strength, and with your own freedom.